Okay, everybody, greetings, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Ayman Tarabishi, President and CEO of the International Council for Small Business. And we are delighted to have you all join us here from wherever you are in the world for this International Women's Day celebration. It is now going to be our fifth event that we are doing at ICSB. I want to thank everybody that attended last year and the year before that. So this year it's a different way of doing it here. It's a more of an open conversation, and I'm really delighted to have you all here. This is a great group, an amazing group of people that agreed to spend some time with us today to talk about the topic that we'll be covering today, which is transforming MSMEs, innovation, trade, and economic growth. And so we have a lot to cover and a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different parts of the world coming in with different reflections here. So my role as a moderator is just to thank everybody for being patient with us as we put this together, for responding to my emails, messages, WhatsApps, and agreeing to carve some time for them today. And as usual, I'd like to first introduce the chair of the board, Dr. Kishan Kim from South Korea. So I think it's midnight for him over there, but he's here. So Dr. Kishan, why don't you give us the welcome remarks?
Hello, greetings from Korea midnight. The Happy International Women's Day. The, uh, the Katya is here. Katya, particularly big congratulations to you. Your yeah, a lot of things for not only for your university, for the world, I think. Today we are celebrating the incredible contribution of women innovators, entrepreneurs in the SMEs sectors or your place. Your leadership and the creativity drive progress, break barriers, and empower the future generation. SME play a pivoting role in fostering inclusive and dynamic economics, and women's innovation is shaping a brighter future. Let us continue to support and uplift women in business, ensuring they have the opportunity to lead and thrive. Congratulations to all women's leadership. Thank you very much. I am looking for your excellent discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Kishan. Thank you very much. And thank you for keeping you up late, so late in Korea. But I'm glad you're here. All right, my partner in crime and my dear colleague, and that's as we always innovate, he's always with me, shoulder to shoulder to build things, create things, and to do a lot of the heavy lifting sometimes of things that I want, that I ask him to do. Dr. Winslow Sargent, I'm so delighted to see you here. How are you today? And I'm glad you're joining us here. Let's kick us off with high energy, Winslow.
Well, appreciate your leadership, Dr. Ayman El-Tarabishi, Chair Dr. Kishan Kim. I'm so excited to be here. I was so looking forward to this day. It's always a great time for us to celebrate the accomplishment of women entrepreneurs around the world, but also, and in my talk, I'll talk about a call to action. But good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. I'm Winslow Sargent, the current immediate past chair of ICSB. In 2024, I was pleased to celebrate International Women's Day in Suva, Fiji. So in the Fijian greeting, I want to greet you, Bula. This year, I'm in Washington, D.C. International Women's Day, a day that not only recognizes the achievements of women worldwide, but also serves as a powerful reminder of the work still ahead in building a more equitable and inclusive economy. This year, in collaboration with the International Council for Small Business, we focus on a critical theme: transforming MSMEs, innovation, trade, and economic growth. Micro, small, and medium enterprises are the backbone of global economies, driving employment, innovation, and sustainable development. Women entrepreneurs in particular are reshaping industries, harnessing technologies, and expanding trade networks. Yet they continue to face significant barriers to funding, market access, and digital transformation. To truly transform MSMEs, we must break these barriers and create an ecosystem where women-led businesses thrive. This means increasing investment in women's innovation, ensuring equal participation in global trade, and fostering policies that promote inclusive economic growth. When women are empowered as entrepreneurs and leaders, they just don't transform businesses, they transform communities, industries, and entire economies. So today, let's not only celebrate progress, but commit to action. Let's invest in women, champion innovation, and drive forward a future where MSMEs become a catalyst for sustainable and inclusive economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Winslow. As usual, your energy, eloquence, and delivery is impeccable. And I'm just always amazed at you. And I do not like you. So let you know that, but just absolutely amazing here. And all right, one of the things that we wanted to do today, instead of just getting into the topic of International Women's Day, is to actually introduce amazing leaders and people that are on the front line, trailblazers, troublemakers, innovators, creative people, hardworking, ambitious, illuminating the world in a different way. Every single one of you that's here today has and is still making a difference in the world in the areas you do. So I asked you all to not just give us your title and what you do, but tell us a little bit more about you, because I think it's only fair the world gets to know you, that we know you in ICSP. So with that, I want to start with my dear colleague and president-to-be of Gonzaga University, and one of the true stars of the world right now. She's going to change higher education as we know it as she comes in. Dr. Katia Passerini, I'm just, the light is shining on you, because the light and the sun is coming on you, which is amazing. It's divine here, Katia. It's divine here. So Katia, thank you and welcome, and introduce yourself for everybody.
Yes, thank you. Great seeing so many women and men in this very nice painting that I see in front of me. And I'd like to also acknowledge all the ones who are following us from different parts of the world. Katia Passerini, I've known Ayman for since we were in kindergarten, so about 25 years or so ago. I have had much of my career in higher education, with a couple of stint at the World Bank and in management consulting for Booz Allen and Hamilton. But most of my career has been in higher education, from New Jersey Institute of Technology to St. John's University to now Seton Hall University as a provost and senior executive vice president, to move now for the first time to the West Coast at Gonzaga University in Washington State as president-elect. So I will start on July 1st. And my passion, as you can see from my career, is really in trying to empower entrepreneurship, and especially women entrepreneurship, through higher education, because I think that fundamentally it's education that transforms lives. So I'm excited about this discussion, especially focusing on what higher ed institutions can do.
Great. Katia, congratulations again. We're, just to let you all know, we're all going to Gonzaga. Just to let you all know, put it in your schedule. We're going to go see Katia in Gonzaga here. So just to let you know, we don't know the date yet, but we're all going at some point.
Yeah.
Thank you. From Geneva. Usually when I message her, and she's always so kind and so sweet to me and so nice to me, her reply when I message her is like, Ayman, what do you want? That's her answer to me every time I message her, saying, what do you want, Ayman? So with that, with no further ado, I think we all know who it is. Dr. Chantaline Carpentier. She's an expert and one of the key founders of MSME Day, and always there to help support me after she yells at me here. Chantaline, welcome. I'm so happy to see you here. How are you today?
I'm good. Happy Women's Day to everyone, all the superwomen on this call and the one listening, and the men supporters of good women out there doing the great work. And of course, Iman deserve what he gets. So there's a reason I say, "What do you want?" I'm Chantaline Carpentier. I'm the head of Trade, Environment, Climate Change, and Sustainable Development at UN Trade and Development, which is the UN agency working to help developing countries to develop true trade, trade, technology, finance, and investment. And my area is trade and. So trade and biodiversity, trade and climate change, trade and circular economy, non-plastic substitute, trade and green and decarbonized supply chains, and trade and the blue economy, the sustainable ocean economy. And we just finished a super ocean forum over the last 3 days where we had actually an expo of entrepreneurs that are actually deploying innovation in the support of the sustainable ocean economy. And that was so well received because oftentimes you get these UN talks and it's for the people on the street, and when our aunt or our cousin, it's not really concrete. When you bring them an innovator that's developed a rope that doesn't use plastic, that will be degrading, and you can go fishing with that rope from South Africa along with Kenya, then they get it. They're like, oh yeah, because they've all seen turtle and tangle and these fish nets that basically kill these animals and get at the bottom of the ocean. And then you say, but we don't have to have this. So as you can tell, I love what I do. I have a great team to do it. We've been collaborating with IMEN on entrepreneurship and the SDGs for the longest time because I do believe the entrepreneurs are the key to achieving the SDGs and a better planet. I also was the past co-chair of the UN Interagency Task Force on Social and Solidarity Economy. And I think it's in the context of today important to mention that out of every 50% of the social entrepreneurs are women, compared to 20% in the rest of the whole economy. So women are important on trade and sustainable development, climate, and environment. Over to you.
Absolutely fantastic, Chantaline. The energy is infectious as usual, and I love your examples. Absolutely, I always learn from your examples. Next, soon we'll be heading to OECD, our partners from the beginning, and when we were pushing for and advocating for and supporting MSMEs here. She is both an expert. She is helps create policy. She does research, and she is a great supporter of ICSB. Dr. Lucia Cusmano. Lucia, glad to see you. I'm glad to have you here for us for our webinar here. How are you doing today, and how's Paris today?
Thank you, Ayman. It's such a pleasure to be with you, and it's a very sunny day in Paris. So a very sunny Friday that I think is a very good entry into tomorrow Women's Day, because you can clearly feel the spring is coming, and so with the spirit that comes with it. Thanks so much, Ayman, because you said we have been a long-standing partner in crime in elevating the MSME agenda at the global level with our various communities. You asked to get a sense of also who we are, and I think it's appropriate on this day to also say that I grew up in an all-boy family in Italy, which may sound for some stereotype, not really the most female-oriented, but no, and this is to stress that you said it also, Winslow, at the beginning, communities, families, attitude matters. So I grew up in a very supportive all-boy family that have always shown me that there was a way to build confidence, to build bridges, to really carry forward the work when there is passion behind, and but also hard work. And I think, Winslow, you also say that women as hard worker, creative, building communities, but essentially very hard worker, including in their entrepreneurship ventures. I'm from the OECD. I arrived at the OECD about 15 years ago from an academic career where I was working on topics related to innovation, technology, local development. And it was quite natural to get this very close also to the policy making side, as even though I didn't start from the SME angle, it's something that comes up when you talk about innovation and local development. So the transition to the OECD was rather natural because it was getting closer to the policy making and to where we can make a difference also with our research work. So it has been a lot of building agendas, building bridges between analysis and policy, between stakeholders, communities, and helping, contributing to my capacity to develop such agenda. When I arrived to the OECD 15 years ago, SME was a relatively small area under a larger agenda on industry, though with a very strong leadership. And it's a pleasure to say that after 15 years, its role has been elevated to the highest policy attention, as we say in jargon of the OECD Level 1 Committee, which basically means all country recognized, and talking about SMEs and entrepreneurship is as important as talking about tax policy, trade policy, investment, industry. So it's really a very essential engine for the resilience and growth of our economies and communities. So a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, Lucia. As usual, thank you so much. Just so I'll let you know, for me to recruit Lucia was me sending her messages. I'm like, Lucia, where are you? And she's like, I'm in Spain, I am in Morocco. And my reply to her is like, okay, so when do you come back? Right? So this is just a little background on how I was reaching her here. But I just want to start making some connections here as you all hear us speak here. And I want you to understand that Winslow, even though I don't like him, has set the stage on key words. It takes a family, it takes a village, it takes a lot of hard work. But let me now make some connections here. Chantaline is always leading the way from a global audience from the UN perspective on global ideas. That's Chantaline's strength. That's her area. She is an innovator and she is an entrepreneur in a very closed environment, but she's shaking ideas with it. Katya is on the forefront of education, higher education, and building the minds of the future leaders. I believe Lucia is the foremost expert in the world that takes research and turns it into policy. That's her magic. That's her area of strength. And we've seen it before. We've seen how she can take a research idea or research that's been going on in a country and turn this into a policy conversation. And that's just absolutely amazing. Next, I want to bring it back to what I call research just difficult to be done, but someone that took this research and turned it into something that is mainstream, that people understand, people like to read about, and she comes in and changes the research conversations into something, if I may, she is the influencer, if you believe that, of social media influencer of entrepreneurship research. I am a follower of her. Christina Teodoki, how are you, Christina? How's the social media aspect of entrepreneurship research and global impact going on, Christina?
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. I would like to express and say happy International Women's Day. And it's an honor for me to participate to this event. So I would like to thank you because it's an honor. And it's also very important to be here and celebrate this day, an important day, act as a reminder for all the challenges that women face all over the world and the actions we need to remind how it is important to have this special day and empower women all around the world. So my name is Cristina Theodoraki. I'm Greek and French, so I have two nationalities. I'm a full professor in entrepreneurship, in entrepreneurial ecosystems in Aix-Marseille University. So now I'm speaking to you from the beautiful Aix-en-Provence in the southwest of France. I'm also the program chair of the entrepreneurship division in the Academy of Management. And I think it's a great moment to spread around this mindset, this dynamic that we create here, and also empower women all over the world and find as a collective action what we can do together. So for me, it's great also to share this information through social media, because I think social media is also spreading and create and empowers this dynamic, but also celebrate role models and idols all over the world, and celebrate these women that are trying very, very hard to contribute to entrepreneurship and SMEs and economic growth and so on. So thank you very much for inviting me.
I told you I am a follower of all the stuff she does. I don't know how many followers she has on LinkedIn and everything. Just absolutely amazing. But the topic is so important that it's something that a lot of people need to learn about. And Christina is at the forefront of this. So we talked policy, we talked education, we talked, social media and integration of research and policy and research. But there's one person here that sits with women CEOs, that understands the challenges they have, understands sometimes the frustrations they have, and she has conversations with them to show them opportunities, to show them areas where things can not just go incrementally, but to expand exponentially. And that is Camille Burns. Camille, it's a delight to have us here on our first webinar here. How are you today, and where are you?
Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. I'm in New York. And as Ayman said, I'm Camille Burns. I'm the CEO of the Women Presidents Organization. First of all, Ayman, Kishan, Winslow, I want to thank you for putting this together, because it's so important for women to have allies. It's so important to have men who support women entrepreneurs. And I just want to thank you for being here and spending your time having this conversation and making this happen. The WPO, the organization I run, is a peer learning education organization for women running multi-million-dollar companies. So we run peer advisory groups. We have a community, a diverse and dynamic community of women from around the world running multi-million-dollar companies. And the reason we do this is that women, when you get to this larger size business, when you get to having employees and having a company that's growing, the conversation is different. The challenges are different. And the number of women at that level gets smaller and smaller the larger the businesses get. So what we do is we create a space for women to share with each other, share expertise and resources, and talk about the challenges and opportunities that they're dealing with, and hopefully grow and scale their companies. So that is the main focus of what we do. Myself, I'm a huge supporter of women's entrepreneurship. I know the economic value that women, the number of employees that women have on a global scale, and how many lives are changed by women business owners. And so it's just my passion to support women and help them grow and scale their companies and have more of an impact, and hopefully eventually exit their companies in a successful way and create that wealth for their community and for their families. So happy to be here, and just loving the conversation, and it's an honor for me to be with all of these other incredible women and just understand the work that you're doing, because all of us together, I think, are really creating an incredible impact for women.
Great. Thank you, Camille. It reminds me of this Hamilton song, "In the Room Where It Happens," right? In which, when the deal was done for the federal government, I think you're in the room with all these women CEOs having these conversations, and that's just absolutely remarkable, the impact they have. So thank you very much. Last year we had our conference, our World Congress in Berlin, and we got emails that South Africa was coming, and they had a topic of focus as equally important on women entrepreneurship and leadership. There was a major focus on the creative economy. And I was delighted to meet them and talk to them about it, and the leadership that they have, the innovation that they have in pushing for the creative economy is driven by a lot of people, but one of them is here today. Amy, how are you? She's I keep wondering where she is because she's traveling all over the place, but now she's in Geneva as well. So Amy, I'm delighted you're here. Tell us about you, and what you do is really important.
Thank you, Ayman. And yeah, happy International Women's Day to friends, colleagues, and future friends, I hope. Especially the women among you, whom I'm very excited to just deepen a network with. So yeah, I come from the creative economy, and I think I've been a serial ideator and creator in the creative economy for the better part of 20 years. It's a place where we see a lot of small businesses and a lot of MSMEs, and especially micro businesses and entrepreneurs and freelancers really kind of burgeoning at the grassroots level and contributing to something that we often underappreciate, and that's the value of culture. But what I've been thinking a lot about is how culture and innovation are interlinked, and especially how women drive that interlinking so actively at the grassroots without much prompting. And this is an amazing skill that that we need to lever at scale, I think. And to do that, I'm on a secondment at the moment to UN Human Rights, and we are working on an incredible campaign to bring together people, MSMEs, big corporates, Global South, Global North, and all kinds of innovators to innovate around human rights and to come together in what we're calling an innovation circle. So this is basically a brainchild of a long-time serial entrepreneur and intrapreneur and ideator. And that's myself. I think all teams I work with hate it when I walk in and say, I have an idea, because it means work for everybody else. But I think it also means that I'm very solutions driven, and I've spent my whole career being creative and trying to find solutions to problems or challenges, as we always like to say that. And for this, I've been at the intersection of academia. I am a serial academic as well, media and communications, economic development, tech and innovation, and specifically the creative and digital economies. I've worked before with Chanteline at UNCTAD. I've been in the UN Secretariat. I've worked at the South African Cultural Observatory, and then also for big corporates, everyone from Ford to FIFA, Experian, the Kuche Industrial Development Zones, Special Economic Zone in South Africa for municipalities and governments. And so this is the wonder of a life of kind of somebody who's seminally curious. And I really just want to share a little bit about how creativity and innovation come together, and really how women play such a fundamental role in driving that. Looking forward to our discussion. Thanks to everybody who's made time today.
Yeah, absolutely, Amy, absolutely amazing. I remember I was in Berlin, and I think you stood up and asked a question, and I turn around and I tell Winslow, I'm like, who is she? Right? And because she hit home with the topic itself. And then I went up and introduced myself to her, and she like smiled. She goes like, oh, we're just starting. So absolutely, absolutely fantastic. I get these WhatsApps sometimes with these research ideas, and sometimes they are so creative, so big in scope, that I have to stop and say, I need to sit down and read what she's really asking me to think about here. The last one is the intersection of AI, policy, entrepreneurship, a cross-cultural comparison between the US, Korea, and Poland. So you can see Camille and Christine, I have to sit down here. It's like, I need a drink to understand this. But she's here. And this is the scope and magnitude and power she brings with these ideas to change economies and connecting everything. I would like to introduce Alina. Alina, we're so delighted to have you here. Why don't you introduce yourself for everybody?
Yes, hello everyone. Thank you, Ayman, for inviting me here. I'm so happy to be together with you. It's a real pleasure. So my name is Alina Landowska, and I think I can bring the perspective from Poland and the broader Central and European Union, and also from the mostly from Central and Eastern European countries. But yes, what I'm keen on is, so I'm working with SMEs for over 20 years. And I used to work for regional and national development agencies. So I do have also some experience with BIAC at OECD, where I've been working for a while. So my perspective is quite cross-national a bit for Polish conditions. And it means that I'm trying to push the entrepreneurship system in Poland a level up, and this is not easy. We are trying to do our best. And the thing that we are currently working with is the AI. So Ayman knows that we are currently working on different strategies, how to improve the system, how to support the SMEs. And that's what I usually do. And I also teach international economics at different universities here in Warsaw. So this is a challenging stuff when we are discussing right now these hot issues regarding the economic situation all over the world. And in the meantime, I love tennis. I loved also Nordic walking, so a bit of my private life. But this is the thing which I really enjoy. And reading books as well. So I hope that today we will have a very empowering discussion and some new insights. I also hope that we'll deepen our network. I've seen you are such a lovely people from all over the world, and I'm really looking forward for your ideas on those questions, which are so much inspiring. So thank you, Ayman.
Thank you, Alina. Mental note not to play against you in tennis. That's out of the list here. So next, so she is a doctor. You know, she is a physician, but she's also teaching innovation and creativity at GW. And I see amazing leadership track for her, where not only it's in medicine, it's carving out education programs, teaching young people. And I want to introduce Dr. Francesca Joseph. Francesca, she is Italian, but she doesn't speak Italian. So sometimes I write to her in Italian and she says, "Si," which is enough for her to say that. So Francesca, good morning. How are you? So
good morning. I am thrilled to
I have to say one more story. One time I was emailing her and it was so much snowing outside. She told me, "Ayman, wait a minute. Let me make sure my kids are not frozen. Let me come back to you." So Francesca, go for it. Introduce yourself.
Yes, another role of mine is as mother of frozen children. So I'm very thrilled to be here. Thank you, Ayman, for the introduction and invitation. So as mentioned, I am a physician, specifically trained in pediatrics. So of all the medical specialties, there's quite a large representation of women in that medical specialty. So I have the privilege of working with many brilliant female minds, which I very much enjoy. But the title of pediatrician doesn't exactly reflect what I do. I've spent my career more than 15 years in medtech innovation, specifically pediatric medical device development. I started that journey at the Food and Drug Administration at the launch of my career. And then have since taken up academic pediatric practice, where I have government funding to run some accelerators and device consortium where we assist pediatric device innovators to get through the total product life cycle, not just the FDA, but supporting them along the entire journey. So work with a lot of academics who just have a device that they haven't even formed a company around yet. But the predominance are just small businesses, startups that have a pediatric device. And I think of myself as kind of an innovation facilitator together with my team. So, and then from a global perspective, a lot of outside US companies are looking to launch in the US, and that involves getting through FDA. So helping them with that expertise and assistance. I also do clinical research, so in pediatric devices. So principal investigator on some of those studies. So I think someone mentioned turning research into policy. I very much focused on research into marketable products, and specifically products that help the pediatric population, which historically has been very underserved in comparison to the pediatric to the adult market. So I'm very much looking forward to the conversation today.
Great. Thank you,
Thank you.
Francesca. Absolutely fantastic. Last but not least, she was in medicine. I think she shifted outside medicine to now startups, incubators. I think she's transforming her career into a mix of medicine, startup, entrepreneurship, innovation. And she keeps changing her title. I think she's CEO now. So, Alyssa, what's the latest? What's your latest title and what are you doing? Because I lost track of how much innovation you're doing.
Oh, well, that's very kind. Well, I will certainly fill everybody in. It's great to be here. Thank you for this opportunity. And also, just want to say thank you for the opportunities that you create for women outside of this forum. It's really amazing to have allies like you, like Camille was saying. And I think beyond the obvious of what we all have in common, I think the other thing that we have in common is that we can't say no to you. So as I see some of these familiar faces time and time again, I appreciate being included. So yes, I think you gave everyone a heads up that I'm a bit of a health tech nerd and I'm also an adrenaline junkie. So I do like to be doing a lot of things, which also probably explains why I went from engineering school to medicine, became an emergency physician in pediatrics, like Francesca, and now spend a lot of my time working in startups. And so we could spend a lot of time talking about all of the similarities there, but in all seriousness, my career focus and my passion has always been figuring out ways to use technology to be the great equalizer and really use technology to close healthcare gaps, not only here in the US, but actually globally. And so with that, I do wear a number of hats. I spent 20 plus years in academic medicine, and I actually am still a practicing physician, but did make a transition to spend more time in industry, innovating and investing, trying to have actually a bigger impact than I felt I could from within the walls of one institution. And I've actually been able to do some of this internationally as well. So shout out to Mr. Kim over there, because I spent a few years living in South Korea, which is one of my happy places on earth, and actually was quite inspiring to live there because it was so innovative. It was just like infused in the culture, and definitely made me a better innovator having spent some time there. So my takeaway and my call to action from all of this is it's so important for us to engage and collaborate and build. And with that, I'm saying let's engage earlier with each other, collaborate together, but not just at one point in time, really collaborate continuously so that we can build for a better future. And with that, I will kick it back over to you.
Thanks, Alyssa. Just a side story here with Alyssa is we were doing International Women's Day, and I asked her to be a panelist a couple of years ago. And then it was like 12 o'clock, which was 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. And she was in a lobby in a hotel in Seoul, South Korea, joining the webinar. And I still remember this. I'm like, where are you? She's like, I'm in the lobby of a hotel joining the webinar.
That's right. I totally forgot about that. I was in Dragon Hill Lodge on the base at Yongsan because it was COVID, and you had graciously extended an invitation, and I didn't want my kids to show up. So
just
thanks for that memory.
Absolute commitment and absolute class. Thank you, Alyssa. Okay, I spent some time asking you all to do an extensive introduction here. It's not just it's a one-way deal where you share your ideas, but actually to get to know each other. Now you all know each other. And of course, now we'll connect you all together. I think creating allies, as Alyssa mentioned and Francesca mentioned, is so critical in International Women's Day. So one of the outcomes of today, not just one, but many of, but this is one of them, is to start building synergies and networks that you all connect with each other. So Katia, Lucia, Chantaline, now you have a Rolodex of people. Camille, if you have a company that's starting up in the healthcare and you want someone to look into startups with you or to get you through the FDA, now you know the inside people. Right? The only thing I ask you all to do is not yell at me, okay? Like Chantaline does. That's the only thing that's in the clause for all the contracts. Stop yelling at Ayman. But with that, let's get to the questions here. And there are some questions that are related more to other specific people than the other ones. So I will start the first question. My partner in crime, Winslow, will do the second question. I will hand select. So Chantaline, get ready. Lucia, get ready. Some of the questions, and then we'll open it up for other people to jump in and answer as well. So let's start. We're a little bit behind, but we have enough time. The first question here, which is on the roundtable discussion here, is what key strategies can development agencies implement to help MSMEs overcome barriers to trade, financial access, and digital transformation? This is up your alley, Chantaline. This is trade here, and you've been living this, experiencing it here. So tell us how what happens? How can we help change this?
Well, thank you, Ayman. And thank you for also not sharing the question in advance. Or maybe you did, and I just didn't have time to look at them,
Yeah,
so
I
I'll just
did.
wing it. But I think I'll just give a specific example since everything, here is much more um, raw, like
Organic.
right? So basically, what we're doing now, we're preparing policy guides for decision makers in countries as they develop their nationally determined contributions, which is their commitment under the Paris Agreement, their climate plan, right? That they're preparing. And one of the things that we're doing is we did a survey of the 60 developing countries and DCs and very few of them use trade measures that they already have at their disposal. Very few of them look at new diversification of supply chain and products, like especially nature-based products that where developing countries have competitive advantage, or very few have investment plans. Very few, and I actually involved their trade ministry into the development of the NDC. So it's not surprising that you would not find that more means of implementation. So on the one hand, what we're doing now is this policy guide is helping those decision makers. And the first suggestion in the policy guide is to involve the trade ministries. The second suggestion is involve MSMEs and entrepreneurs, because they're the one that will actually know what is it that you're good at, what is it that needs to be done, so they can actually scale, diversify, and increase resilience in the supply chain. Because they have a tendency that they would invite the big companies, multinational, which by the way oftentimes are international and not necessarily nationals, while the MSMEs and the entrepreneurs will tend to be national. So, and we are also suggesting that they invite the cooperatives, the Women's Association, Indigenous Peoples Group, whoever groups that are important, so that the decision are made in full knowledge, but also will be made to integrate from the get-go these social entrepreneurs that tend to have at heart the development of decarbonized supply chains and nature-based solutions and others. So I would say that's one specific example. We're also preparing now specific recommendation on these issues on financing and these entities for the Financing for Development Forum that will be held in Sevilla, because too often, and we're doing that with our sister agency at the International Trade Center as well, because they've worked a lot on the ground with MSMEs and entrepreneurs. And we're making specific recommendation to support these 50% of social entrepreneurs that are women and the others. We're also working on the ocean economy, so making suggestion that you actually have a lot of entrepreneurs at the national level having non-plastic substitute seaweed utilization for packaging for trading that is non-plastic, based on seaweed. And all of these are usually dominated by women entrepreneur. And I don't think it's going to surprise anybody on this call. So our role, what I like to do, I'm in here, is that we on our program on biodiversity, on climate, on decarbonization of supply chain, non-plastic substitute, ocean, is basically to look at and with this, the UK government and the Swiss government, we actually have money to identify on the ground entrepreneurs that have solution. We test them, we support them, and then once we see what works, what is needed to support them to scale and deploy, we bring this to the intergovernmental negotiation. And I think that's the way to do it. Otherwise, you get a lot of great work done by these entrepreneurs, but it never informed the national policies or the intergovernmental negotiation on plastic, eliminating plastic, or on climate change, or you get these decisions at the intergovernmental level that do not reflect the underground entrepreneurial innovation that already exists. So that's, I would stop here. There's many more things that UNCTAD does on technology, on investment and trade, but I think that gives you an example.
Absolutely. And so, as I mentioned before, the global stage, the global conversation, which is perfect. That's your area of expertise and strength, actually. But there's also a person that ties these research into policy, and that's Lucia. Lucia, you just heard Chantaline mention what she's doing. What about from an OECD perspective, from what you hear and see? Where do you come in this?
Thank you. I would align very much with what Chantaline said in terms of priorities, that is to say, upstream engagement, listening to the entrepreneurs, the business representatives, recognizing their very large diversity. A challenge that we often see when we have to translate research into policy is, in fact, helping policymakers to understand the very broad diversity of entrepreneurs, their profile, their conditions, and therefore how to balance the targeted and the general approach. There are areas where we know that traditionally the approach has been more for horizontal policies, but where often disregard such differences in the capacity of small businesses and entrepreneurs also to read this policy. And that relates to another point where we put a lot of emphasis in the policy dialogues, raising awareness. Chantaline, I think she mentioned that. Entrepreneurs, they live, as all of us, in a world where the information landscape is very noisy. There is a flood of information. And these also concern the policy side, the tools, the regulation, the framework. So where we see that a lot of improvement can be made is in really helping navigate this information. It's not only the noise that comes naturally from a highly volatile economic environment, but also the many different tools, policies, programs that are put in place by very diverse agencies. So this here, for example, we have seen the value of the one-stop shop that are emerging increasingly, digital, where AI tool can help the users, in fact, tailor to their own needs. And I think there a huge potential somehow to make personalized the search for this information, including from the public administration. Then just another small point, which is about the very easy answer often that there is in policy making to some of these challenges, which is, okay, we have to devise a financial tool, a financial instrument. Of course, this can be very important, subsidies or grants or tax. But what we see is that often these have very limited impact if they are not accompanied by some type of knowledge support. It can be, again, to navigate, but it's also in terms of opening up to entrepreneurs the networks where they can find advisory services and they can combine, therefore, what could be a financial instrument also with some type of training of learning. So these are some elements that I think can be highlighted.
Great, Lucia, thank you. You know who comes to my mind now is Camille, because Chantaline mentioned bring people to the table to have conversations. She mentioned entrepreneurs, CEOs, executives. Lucia, you mentioned upstream, but yes, we can give them some financial tools to use, but really it's not just the financial tools, because these are CEOs that do many things. And Camille, you heard this, right? You were in these meetings, and now you have these institutions doing all this. What's your reaction to this? Where do you see the connection and the disconnect, if you may?
Well, first of all, when Chantal said listening to the entrepreneurs, I don't know if you noticed how much I was nodding, but I feel like that's so often the case is you've got really incredibly smart people trying to do really wonderful work and they don't fully understand the experience of the business owner. And so having those conversations and making sure that there are business owners and entrepreneurs that are involved in the conversations on what kind of support people need, because also women need different support in some ways than small business owners that are, or companies that are owned by men. So bringing women to the table to have the conversation, I think, is so vitally important as well. And, you know, sometimes with women, it's not just the education, it's not just the understanding, but it's that women have much smaller networks. There's a really interesting LinkedIn study on the size of women's networks versus networks of men. And so making sure that you're also creating spaces for women to build relationships, make connections, and have access to different individuals, so that, you know, we all need access to grow our companies and to scale and to innovate and grow on a global scale. So I think that listening aspect is so vitally important, and also understanding that with women, sometimes there's other factors like confidence, imposter syndrome. Women don't always have the same role models of entrepreneurs. So when they get bigger, they become successful entrepreneurs, they don't always, you know, you can talk to a woman with a $400 million company and she'll one-on-one say, I don't know why I'm here. Like, I don't belong to be here. And of course she does. She's wildly smart. She's built this incredible company, but, you know, there's just some emotional issues and psychological issues that women sometimes deal with in different countries that can have an even greater impact. So, you know, I was smiling very much when we talked about having women involved in the conversation and having entrepreneurs and small business owners involved, because that is the key piece to making sure that we're supporting entrepreneurs.
Camille, thank you. Chantaline, you flagged. You wanted to jump in and say something?
Yeah, I just need to compliment because Camille mentioned the stats. So we have this E-Trade for Women program because we have E-Trade for All, which are helping, you know, the entrepreneurs in the tech side and developing countries. And we realized right away that we needed to have one specific for women because their needs are different. But what I want to add is that we do these regional master classes and we ask them what their needs are, and then we bring the resources. But you know, the one thing that they ask the most, it's not money, it's actually network, being connected to women like them in their own area, so they can, in regional geographical area, so they bet because they feel lonely. So just want to support what you just said and and reinforce it.
Okay, so I'm going to ask this question, but Amy, I'm going to ask you this question. You talk about culture, you talked about culture, you talked about the creative economy. What is it that you're hearing from here that you're saying, hey, Ayman, I see this? Is it something there that you say that's something that we need to look into more, Amy?
I think creativity and innovation are intimately linked, and culture and innovation are also intimately linked. And I think it's a lever that we don't pull on as often as we should, because I think one of your questions is about competitiveness, and there is such a huge amount of competitiveness in the marketplace across the board. And many tools, AI and other technology tools, are actually leveling the playing field and changing the entire dynamic of the way marketplaces respond, MSMEs respond, putting all these tools in people's hands. But how you use them is a function of culture, experience, education, and then how you innovate with them. It's the same thing. And so really, I think as we try to grow MSME ecosystems in the locales where they're based, we really need to look at indigenous innovation. And I don't mean that necessarily from an indigenous people's perspective, but what are your innovation ecosystem? What are the factors on the ground? Well, how does your network innovate? And women in a world that isn't designed for women, and we know this, we navigate this on the chairs we sit in, even in the digital spaces we occupy. We innovate around the systems that are built not for us, and we innovate about how we navigate within them. And I think there's something to be done, or perhaps it's a combination of research and experimentation, and reflection on how women-led MSMEs are actually innovating within the systems that they are in, to gain a competitive advantage, or to as Chanceline was mentioning, the social economy as well, to actually create resiliences and systems that are in place. And sorry, I might be scuppering another question that you have here, but yeah, this is a function of culture and how we connect and then build using those connections. And it's that foundational work that I think can really actually be a differentiator and a competitive edge across countries and communities.
Okay, well then, heck, you mentioned culture, indigenous. Alina comes to my mind because Alina is looking at in Poland, is looking at AI, looking at MSMEs. Alina, what do you think, Alina?
Thank you. I was just raising my hand. I was thinking about that.
I read your mind.
Thank you for reading my mind. Yes, you know, a little bit different perspective from here, because I was wondering when you ask about these barriers, like in trade, in digitalization, and some other stuff. So I realized that we have a serious problem here right now. I mean, SMEs, with skills shortages. And this is quite a broad problem. I can tell you, I met representatives of Polish small and medium-sized companies this week. It was a huge conference here in Warsaw, and the conference was devoted to technology adoption. And that was, of course, my key focus. But on the other hand, what was discussed is just the serious problem with skilled employees. And I want to share one slide with you because I think it describes great the situation that Chantal already brings to the table. And I think you can see here, this is the question which was asked to European companies. What are actually the problems that they are currently facing? And you know, the first place, it's like finding employees. This is a huge problem here in Poland as well. And the second problem, please see this, this is nothing else like bureaucracy, right? So we are having a huge discussion here on those stuff, and digitalization, which is a part of your question, actually is not as much. I think that companies are not aware of that. They are trying to compete or dealing with different problems that they have on a daily basis, that they don't even think about something like digitalization, but they have a problem with this. And especially we can see that in the polarized Europe. I'm very curious about other perspectives. I hope that Chantal, for instance, and Amy will bring those different perspectives as well. So you can see here this problem even is getting worse, because we have polarized Europe. On one hand, we have Finland, Denmark, Netherlands, with quite a good business digitalization with high scores over 60%. And on the other hand, in contrast, we have like Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. So you can see that we have the under 40 or a bit above 40 points. So it means that the companies are completely in complete problem, and this is a disaster from the digitalization perspective. So here we are right now discussing a lot about the technology adoption, how to improve it, how to help companies. And I'm very curious about Chantal's perspective in this matter, because it's like this is what we are facing. I mean, like a strategist here trying to develop the strategy, and we are also trying to find out a good case studies. This is what already Ayman mentioned today, that we are trying to build a very international project with Ayman and also Kishan from Korea, to see how their companies are trying to adopt technologies and how we can actually adopt the similar solutions in our situation. So when we talk about the trade, or when we talk about some other, I mean, trade in, probably you mean in international trade. So we have also this quite convenient situation that we have a single European market. So that helps a bit, because the companies, they have less bureaucracy if they want to sell on the single European market, but they face a lot of different challenges if they are talking about or trying to expand on foreign markets. And foreign markets would be some other third countries like Korea, like US or South Africa. So this is the situation on our side. And I can see that from my perspective, I mean the perspective Polish one, we don't manage the problem yet. And unfortunately, I must admit that I can't see any good solutions at the European level. But I'm very happy to hear that there are some great ideas at the UN level. So this is quite optimistic in comparison what we face here right now.
Thank you, Alina. So then that leads us to the second question. This is where now I get Dr. Winslow to jump in. Dr. Winslow, the second question, which you'll moderate now, is how can innovation and technology, which is Alina mentioned, drive sustainable growth for MSMEs in an increasingly competitive global market? Winslow, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Terabishi. This has been a fascinating discussion, and it's so good to have such great thought leaders share their perspective. Yes, the next question is, with regard to innovation and technology, how can sustainable growth for MSMEs be had, right? I mean, we know that we can start companies. That's something that we want. But how do we make sure not only do they survive, they're sustainable, but they grow? And that's been a huge challenge in terms of churn, right? We have all these companies that start one year and 6 months or a year later, then they close, right? That churn has become a problem. And I will open the floor. Please raise your hands. But I want to start out this question, and I want to bring in Camille, because she mentioned in her opening discussion how that she works with women presidents, and these are companies that have gone through the growth, that they're on the growth curve, but they're scaling. So it's not just starting, but they're scaling. And I would love to hear her perspective in terms of how these leaders that she works with, how do they continue to scale and grow, especially in this competitive world?
Thank you so much. First of all, just talking about technology, I mean, it's just a reality right now, right? If you're not investing in technology and you're not making those changes in your company and making them quickly, then you're going to die eventually. I mean, I think that's just the reality we're in. So, we could be honest and frank about that it's really important to stay on top of that. One of the things I will say is that we do a list of the 50 fastest growing women-owned led companies every year. And so we're looking at women-owned companies that are scaling. And we ask them every year, what is one thing you would do differently? And year after year, one of the things that they say is they would have invested in technology sooner, that they would have made those big investments that they felt like they couldn't afford at the time. And then the efficiency that those investments made, what they were able to do in terms of reaching global markets and expanding their business because they made those investments, really helped, elevate their growth and helped them get to the next level. And so I think it's always tricky when you're running a small company because you're so concerned about cash flow, you're so worried about what you know, the resources that you have, but you have to make these investments. And then I would say that that's the same for investing in people. And in terms of innovators and people who really understand technology and that kind of higher level skill set, you see the same thing, that people are afraid to invest in people. And then once they bring that kind of expertise in on their team, they see their company go to the next level. Because you have running a company at $1 million and running a company at $10 million and running a company at $50 million, your infrastructure is totally different, right? So as you grow a company, you have to adjust, you have to change, and you need the right people on your team who understand the technology and are able to help your company grow and scale and change so that it can continue to get to those next levels. Because otherwise, you're just not going to have the infrastructure in place to be able to do the kind of work that you want to do as you continue to grow.
That's great. I mean, really insightful because, you know, when you talk about scale and growth, sometimes that's scary to some folks. They would rather stay small because it's like you can control it. But then when you start to grow and scale, then it can be scary. And so, but it's good to hear your experience just to be able to share. I want to bring in Dr. Abo, since you're an entrepreneur, you're unafraid to scale. You're unafraid to use technology. How do you look at this issue with regard to technology and scaling and sustainability?
Thanks, Winslow. I really appreciate being included in the conversation. It's a great question, and to sort of build off of what Camille's saying, people are such an important part of this. You know, I'm happy to share some perspective from the healthcare med tech world, and nothing is worse than seeing really like smart people, great companies building for problems that like actually like there aren't actually solving a problem that's an unmet need, right? And so there's sometimes that disconnect. And so I think surrounding yourself early with the people who can give you that insight, give you that translation from maybe the clinical world or what are investors investing in, but really sort of bringing those minds together early on to have those conversations, to think early about like what the future looks like, I think is really key. I can share a slide or two just about what this is from my perspective. So when we think of why startups fail, 1 in 5 fail within that first year. And so, and when I was, you know, thinking about this and like why this happens, this graphic really resonated with me. By year 4, 50% of them fail, you know, and then when you like look down the road, 80% of them in 20 years, I haven't been in the startup space long enough to know that statistic, but these earlier ones definitely resonate with me. And then when you're talking about healthcare specifically, you can see the survival rate's only a little bit over 50%. But when you look in these numbers in the aggregate, like maybe healthcare is not doing so poorly, but still it's sort of, I think having some numbers to contextualize this is really important. So if we take it one step further, then why is this happening? I think this, you know, really builds on this conversation. One, this is what I was alluding to, tackling the wrong clinical problem, you know, and again, this is sort of my microcosm of a world. In healthcare, I do think this probably translates, and would love to hear from other folks on the panel what it's like in their industry. But at least from a healthcare med tech perspective, this is one of the biggest reasons for failure. The other one can be that lack of direct clinical environment interaction, so not getting the feedback you need. And then the last one, which we haven't talked about a lot today, is around real world data, which in addition to being a health tech nerd, I'm for sure a data junkie. But I think these are some of the issues early on that are important to address. The elephant in the room that's not on this slide is, of course, money and funding, right? So these are reasons like why they fail outside of that. It's not lost on me that oftentimes it's going to be they are having trouble raising money or they're running out of cash, which again was something that you mentioned. But I think when you're asking Winslow about thinking about tech and innovation and sustainability, again, bringing it back to healthcare, it's thinking early on, okay, I have a problem trying to solve. What is the clinical piece of that? That's 1. What's the business model? That's 2. What's the regulatory piece of that? 3. You know, and there's unfortunately so many of those things early on that need to be considered. But I think one of the things that I see which leads to failure is trying to do them sequentially as opposed to doing them in parallel. And I get that, you know, like it was said, startups don't have a lot of cash and they have to make really hard decisions, but to the best that they can, think earlier about these different aspects and include the right people, in my mind, is what can actually lead to success down the road.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's very, these slides are very helpful. And just to touch on the fact that as you mentioned, some things, because the problem is so large, how do you tackle the problem and in what order? And I think that that's where the networks help, right? That there's a network of people out there that have gone through this road that can advise. And I want to bring in Katia in terms of your leadership and your experience, your vision. How do you address, because with sustainability, we know the SDGs, we know they've been discussed for so many years, but yet we still have a problem with scale up with how to make sure that these companies are sustainable.
Yeah, so thank you, Islo. I'd like to go back to something that Camille said about what she observed. The entrepreneurs she works with said, I wish I had invested in technology earlier. And that's usually difficult because technology is costly. There is a lot of freeware, but it only carries you so much. So when you make a technology investment, you're kind of locked in, and sometimes it's easy to get in and then prices keep increasing, even in a software as a service model. Every year you get additional increases in costs. So I think it is a dilemma for small and medium organizations that want to scale. But it is essential, and I want to link to the second thing that Camille said, investing in people. Just recently in the Journal of Small Business Management, I co-published with colleagues from Songyang University in South Korea an article that shows exactly that. We were looking at South Korean small and medium enterprises, and every time that we found that there was a CTO, Chief Transformation Officer, Chief Digital Officer, someone who understood how to use technology strategically, well, they were sustainable and they were actually able to generate revenue in the long term. So what I would just recommend is that this investment in people that understand technology and which technology investments to do needs to be done immediately. Otherwise, there is too much competition. It's a failure. It's even, I'm not saying it's more important than the marketing officer or understanding the business plan, but it is as important. And we have data that shows that it actually impacts revenue in the long run. The other thing that I'd like to suggest, going back to everyone who mentioned the need of a network and finding people with the right skills. Aline, I think you had a slide that said, one of the biggest problems is finding the right people. I want to encourage everyone to think about universities differently and creating collaborations with universities as even asking for a space or use the incubator and accelerators in a different way where entrepreneurs go in and host students and pitch their company, not just when there is the career fair, but actually using space and that sometimes is available in these incubators to create connections with the students. Because it's difficult for a student, a young mind that knows all the tools, the technology, and is ready to actually think about the smaller organization. They just don't know them, right? And they always want to be in the Google of the world, the Facebook of the world, and etc. But there is a very large opportunity for them to get many more skills in small and medium enterprises. So to create this network, I think that there is really a wealth of potential by creating closer connections with universities as and their entrepreneurship centers, which each and every university tends to have. So I think that that's also a very good way of finding talent. Now you need to retain that talent. The risk is you get fresh out of college minds. They have a lot of ideas, but that's where connecting them to the goal and the purpose and the mission of the small and medium enterprise is very important.
Well, thank you, Katia. It's very important that you have pointed out the role that universities play. Sometimes we look at tech transfer, but we don't always appreciate, the role that knowledge transfer helps as well. And of course, you have to invest in people. Yes, that's very, very important. With regard to this topic also as well, let's go to Lucia. Since you, with OECD, with so many countries, with so much data, you can share with us what are some of the best practices and what you've seen in terms of how technology is used for sustainability and growth.
Thank you. No, in fact, we have been conducting studies based on micro level data and policy analysis on scaling up, which I think is quite at the core of this discussion. That I think reveals something that is no surprise to the panel today. That is to say, it's not just tech. You can scale up if you have a good business idea, a good investment in skills, whatever the sector. Some sectors may be more prone than others, but that was quite interesting to see that it was very common across countries, that sector by itself is not really what can explain scale up. We've been looking at the characteristics of businesses that scale up before, during, and after. And I think it's very in line with what was just discussed. Skills as a very important determining character. Investment in research personnel, even more important than the actual size of the investment in research per se. So it's again back, I think, to the talent, to being prepared, being somehow agile. I would connect this aspect of innovation and technology at the core of growth, but also survival, as related to agility, capacity to anticipate trends, capacity to react very quickly to a very volatile environment, but also to new opportunities that may emerge. Let's think that 1 year and a half ago, generative AI was just for a few, and now it's a normal tool. But imagine being there just when it comes out and understanding from day zero what opportunities it can open up for you, but also what other changes you need to make in your business organization, in your business plan. Continuous learning, I think that was also emphasized. But let me mention also data. Agility, responsiveness means that you understand and you are able to monitor and interpret the world around you. So access, use, protection of data is, I would say, key to how businesses can grow in such a knowledge-based and economy. Data also is related to sustainability. This is something that we see as a clear link between the green and the digital transition. The business case for the green transition, which is often obscure to many SMEs, is efficiency. But how that means that you are able to understand that you have some efficiency gap, and that by making certain investment, we can call them sustainability or efficiency driven, you can be more efficient or more productive. In the end, the green transition is also a question of using better the resources that you can access, be them material resources, but also human resources. So I think all of these can lead us then to emphasize this data-driven decision-making that from a policy perspective is certainly related to the agendas connected with open data, with easing access to infrastructure for data and for data analysis by SMEs. For example, we see more and more experiences of universities that offer services in terms of high, powerful computing capacity to the businesses around them. So another role that maybe wasn't there a few years ago. But it also means raising awareness about the risk. So all the aspects related with digital security, if your decisions are driven by data, you need to protect your data, but you also need to be able to understand which data are good and which data are not good, or which data may be misleading. So there is all the question, I think, related with awareness, but also skills development as related to data access and data security.
Okay, well, that what you shared is so insightful in terms of the need to look at data and to share what is going on within what we know within small businesses. I I think back to when I was at the SBA Office of Advocacy, which I led from 2010 to 2015, and I remember that that in the United States, there are more than 33 million small businesses, SMEs. But when you dug deeper into the numbers, more than 85% of these SMEs, they do not have any employees. They're lifestyle businesses. And so we used to ask the question, well, okay, for growth, if each one of them was to hire someone, then, then you got about 25 million businesses that don't have any employees. And some of them were lifestyle businesses and some didn't want to grow. So even though we may have all the data, there are some businesses that are comfortable not growing. And so I want to go to Alina, since your hand is up. How do we how do we how do we lessen the fear that growth is not harmful, that growth is something that should be considered and not have lifestyle businesses in the effort for a more sustainable growth for businesses?
I think that currently, well, already you started to talk about it, but let me name it, economic uncertainty. And this is probably the problem which we face right now. And I hope we all agree that innovation and technology play a critical role in investments. And when companies face, shortly speaking, weaker economic conditions, or they anticipate worse condition in the future, they will not invest. And I will let me show you something, because this is quite interesting, very simple thing, which I think explains the situation. Please see this. This is European Central Bank data. And here you can see the two, especially those SMEs and large firms, anticipated economic conditions, shortly speaking, if they want to invest or not. And the trend is unfortunately very pessimistic. We can see here that the first quarter of this year, currently, they don't plan to invest as much as they usually do. So this is a very bad situation, and this is strictly connected with innovation and technology, because this means that they don't want to invest in that. And the question is, what is the reason behind? We think this is the economic condition, this is economic uncertainty that we already face on the global market. But I don't really know and don't have the ready answer to that. But we need to find a way how to quit this super pessimistic scenario. Whatever will happen, the company's decisions reflect this economic uncertainty. And right now, it's going to be, at least for this moment, it's going to reflect the stagnation. So it's not optimistic information for us, and we need to find out the way how to deal with that. So sustainable growth, this is a huge challenge for this moment.
Okay, great. Well said. I mean, there is a lot of uncertainty, and now some will say that uncertainty is a friend to the entrepreneur, because that gives her the ability to disrupt or to change things. And so I want to go to Francesca in terms of, how do you view the role of technology and growth and sustainability, even in uncertain times?
Yeah, we definitely been dealing with a lot of uncertainty of late. I think the healthcare sector is particularly affected in terms of the funding mechanisms, with NIH being a major funder, and then the recent freeze on that funding. How does that affect all the innovation and the many small businesses that are involved in that? So I think public-private partnership has been a huge success story in healthcare innovation. Not just those funding mechanisms, but the various programs available to help innovators in this sector. I think data is a piece of that as well. I think MSMEs have such an opportunity to kind of improve their operational efficiency, using data, they can get insights into consumer behavior, market trends, performance metrics. But then in healthcare, in my world, you need data to be able to not just get through the FDA, you have to attract investors. So proving safety and effectiveness of what you're doing, attract the investors with that data. And then there's insurance companies playing into this in the US market. So you have to then not just prove that your innovation is safe and effective, but now do a health economic study so that the payers will actually reimburse the new technology. And so generating that data is expensive. I think there's a lot of programs available, through government funding, at least historically, that has helped that. But now with AI models and having to train that, getting that data, often in healthcare, the data is siloed. So a small startup company that knows that the data may be out there through a children's hospital, but accessing that data is a barrier. So how do they overcome those barriers and get the data that's actually already out there as a more efficient path versus generating it themselves? So it's a big problem. And then ensuring that that data actually is meaningful means you have to train the model on the actual patients you're targeting. So training a model on adult data for a pediatric patient is not going to work. It needs to be trained on the pediatric data because kids are not just little adults. So all of those factors come into play, and I think it translates across other industries as well.
Yeah, health plays such a big role in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of the economy. I just want to wrap up this question to Amy in terms of under COVID, we saw that the embracing that those who had embraced digital technologies, they were the ones who were able to make the transition. That if you didn't embrace digital tech and if you didn't have a website or if you didn't have ways to communicate with your customer, then you are at a disadvantage. And in terms of scale, because you live in many communities and you've seen the world, how does digital tech and innovation, how does that help to undergird those companies that want to scale?
Yeah, I think new market access is always a desirable outcome, and one of the great side effects of digital technology is that you are then able to scale and reach new markets. I mean, I see this a lot in the African context as well, where you have, for example, an artist who's been struggling to make it at a local level, but sets up a website, connects with other artists in a wider network, or even manages to find an agent in another country, and then is able to level and scale up in a way that they weren't able to do before. And it's the same, I think, with the sharing and attention economy. If something goes viral, someone in Kenya can blow up globally, a musician or an artist, in ways that were unimaginable before because of digital technologies. Of course, there's a dark side that everyone has to consider. And in a lot of the research I've been doing recently on AI and entrepreneurship, looking at the geographical barriers that people encounter to accessing data and then investments. And I think my colleagues have been speaking about this. There are different barriers for different people, and especially for women. And thinking about automation and AI is another dimension that we need to think about, because in the African context, a lot of automation isn't going to impact Africa at the scale that it will higher income countries. And how do we then navigate that change in temperature? We were speaking about how MSMEs need to scale and employ more people to do so. But with new technologies, there's a less of an impetus to hire more people. Your HR functionality can be outsourced to autonomous agents, and same for your marketing functions. And so we will see, and I think many of the big tech leaders have spoken about this, 3, 4, 5-person companies that are billion-dollar companies. And so it's about looking at what technology can offer, what your geography looks like, and potentially also what markets you're serving based on your geography. Because scale is one thing, but the reality is your customers can be everywhere, but also can be extremely local. And how do you leverage and use that differentiation of where you're based to actually then scale in lateral, horizontal, and then also vertical ways. So yeah, I think digital technology is incredible. I think we need to think about AI and automation and its impact on the labor market and MSMEs, especially, and our scalability potential, and how to actually then, as everyone keeps saying, build the right skills and educate in the right way so that people know how to seize opportunity when it comes.
Okay, great, great. Well, this is a question that we're going to have a lot of discussion. I'm quite sure that the audience and those who are watching are very interested in terms of this discussion. You know, we can continue on, but there's so many other things that we have to cover. So I'm going to pass it back to Ayman. Ayman, you can follow.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask one last question, and we'll open up for the audience. We couldn't get to all of them, but we covered a lot of them in our answers here. But this is really, I want to start with Christina with this question here, because she is at the pulse of research at the Academy of Management with her work and her forefront with technology here. And then I'm going to want to go back to Katya now from a leadership perspective on this one, and we'll open up for the rest. So Christina, what do you think is the role of education and skill development in playing in strengthening MSMEs' resilience and long-term success? Because you are at the pulse of all of this, especially now in Denmark with the AOM coming, you're going to be getting a lot of best practices and research coming to you.
Thank you very much, Ayman. I really enjoy hearing only of these great insights and also different perspectives all over the world. I hear about how companies they fail to sustain over time. We're talking about sustainability, and I'm extremely engaged how we can build successful, sustainable, and inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems. What I observe is that, first of all, companies, they fail to sustain over time because they remain very focused on the operational size of the activities. Also, there is a lack of proactiveness related to the isolated nature. So we can feel isolated because we're focused on the activity, or even as a woman, we can, or entrepreneur, can be isolated. And the third aspect is related to the new skill development. So new skill development, we see that we evolve very, very quickly, and we need to adopt all these new skills. So it's extremely important to adapt educational learning, but also adapt the practices and what we can learn and how we can change this mindset. So we talk about mind shift because we need to shift from isolated entities. So today I think that companies cannot need to develop the skills, but also need to embrace and be part of an ecosystem. So not stay alone, because I think facing all these challenges is extremely important to be part of the ecosystem. And actually we did a study in Greek exporting firms, SMEs, and we see that because they have learned these skills because of the financial crisis, they could better apply, innovate, and improve the digitalization aspects and transform because they have learned from a previous crisis. So we see that this learning can be through the trajectories they face, the context they face, but also it can be also related to the implication with the ecosystem actors and in different activities. For example, we see that today companies can not only face with to collaborate with clients or suppliers, but also how they contribute to the local economic development or international trade, and how they can they expand their involvement and engagement to different communities. So I think this is extremely missing, and we need to reinforce it in the next years through the educational to incorporate classes and learning about this ecosystem mindset. It's not alone. We are part of the community. We are part of can be a woman ecosystem, and we have research identified the specificities and characteristics of woman ecosystem, and I was hearing earlier talking about the networks. So we need to connect and be connected and be part to our ecosystem, but also the woman ecosystem can be expanding to MSMEs ecosystems or entrepreneurial ecosystems or territorial, regional, and international ecosystem. So I think this is a learning how we can develop tools and how we can embrace this mindset of being part of a community and how we contribute with our company. And another part is also because I was talking about engaging, building successful, sustainable, and inclusive entrepreneurial ecosystems. How we can sustain this evolution, because what I observe, for example, in the French context, we invest a lot of money to build a successful entrepreneurial ecosystem that support the entrepreneurial activity. We have sometimes tools that support the woman entrepreneurship, but I think what is missing is that it focused in one time, in one moment over time. So we aim to build a successful ecosystem, and then we leave it like that, so it can get destroyed, and we don't observe that the company, the ecosystem evolve over time. It's a continuous engagement and involvement to fortify and empowerment the community and the actions we have. So in this point, we have also published a research related to the micro and macro factors for firm scaling. So it's very important to be aware of these factors, not only from the company or the individuals, but also from the ecosystem and how we perform over time. And the final aspect related to the inclusiveness, I think that I conducted a study in Tacoma near Seattle, and we see that we want to be inclusive, but we don't know yet how to do it very, very well. So I think sometimes we have this dark side of inclusiveness. We just put woman and man equalities and say, okay, we did the job. So I think it's a change of the mindset, how we embrace a woman, how we embrace minorities, how we give power and leadership and role models. So I think we need to empower more and more of these actions. So this is the discussions of community engagement. As program chair of the entrepreneurship division, I'm extremely engaged also, and we are going to have a lot of sessions in the Academy of Management in Copenhagen in July, related to ecosystem action, university engagement, policy action, practice, bringing together policy, practice, and research worlds together, but also teaching activities to change this mindset, because we need to develop skills to face all this transforming evolution and be prepared of supporting the evolution of economic development. So that's all for me. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, Christina. I love your words: mind shift, mindset, and continuing to sustain here. So saying all these three words here, I'm just gonna throw it to Katya, because she's gonna need to do all of this. So Katya,
yeah, no,
good luck.
Absolutely. Thank you. No, it's I'm gonna focus on the mindset part that Christina mentioned, and I want to go back to what Camille said about meeting a lot of great presidents and CEOs that are still feeling with the $4 million companies that they're the imposters. They have an imposter syndrome. And I'm going to cite two books. One is from Ethan Mollick. He's a professor of management at the Wharton School. He wrote a book recently, which I recommend. It's called Co-Intelligence, and it's all about generative AI and how it's changing everything that we do. There is one chapter there where he describes an experiment that they did, I believe, at Wharton in one of the classes, where they had angel investors evaluate business plans that were submitted by the students. And literally, they didn't know who submitted the business plan, but there were about, say, 20 business plans submitted. 16 of those that were picked by the judges were written through generative AI. They were not written by people. So what does that tell me? Is that we now have technology that can facilitate a lot of the skills that we generally teach to entrepreneurs in the classrooms, finance, human resources. You can get a lot of that very fast and very quickly. What you cannot get to is what Camille was discussing, is that resilience, that building of character, that feeling that we can do, that sometimes, especially as you scale, especially as you find more and more difficulties, it's difficult to work on. And that's where I think a lot of our entrepreneurship teaching needs to change towards teaching more leadership skills, but also teaching skills for resilience. I would like to quote another book. It's an older one, Viktor Frankl. He was an Austrian psychologist, psychiatrist that founded a discipline called logotherapy. And it's all about searching for meaning and understanding purpose and how to deal with difficulties. In his case, was difficulties in a concentration camp. So it's a book that is very deep in terms of how you find your raison d'etre in front of difficulties. But it teaches about resilience and about finding meaning in some higher spaces. For some can be religions, for other can be belief in in a technology or whatever you feel as your ultimate meaning. But those type of approaches, I think, are the ones that can help entrepreneurs, and especially women entrepreneurs, to think about long-term results, to think about how strong they are and how you can deal with difficulties and challenges in the long run, or as I think someone else mentioned, uncertain economic times. And yet, if you're focusing on your purpose and your meaning, you're able to deal with anything that comes at you. In the case of, In Search for Meaning was, of course, being in concentration camps. So I would like for us to think about shifting the mindset of our next generations of entrepreneurs by thinking about building more those leadership and resilience skills, as opposed to some of the skills that now can be automated quickly through a Gen AI system.
Great, Katia, thank you. Chantaline, I believe you are one of the most resilient people and most connected people in the UN when you were in New York and now in Geneva. You change people's minds very quick, and you get them to do things that are incredibly difficult. What's your secret here?
Are you serious?
I ask the questions.
I'm all prepared to talk about tech and stuff. Could I mention quickly something on the tech, just for and complement what Katia just said? Then I'll come back. My brain might pop up with something. But on the tech side, I think I see a correlation between MSMEs and developing countries. What we're finding, when you look at the energy transition is going to be needed to decarbonize, right? When you do the modeling, you can find that these countries, especially in developing country, energy price is going to go up, they're going to shoot up, labor is going to go down in the short term, and GDP is going to go down. But if you model it towards the end of the century, a bit later after 2050, 70, 80, the GDP goes up. If they've decarbonized, the job would go up, and the energy price come back down. So what does that tell me? And I think I see the same analogy for MSMEs that need to invest in digitalization. There's an immediate cost. They're short on money. They have a zillion other things they need to invest in. So what we need is a fund to help the transition to get them over the hump so they get on the other side. We don't have a fund that advance that money that it could be an instrument, a financial instrument we develop so they can pay it back once they've done the transition. But I think this is because that's what I'm suggesting for developing countries. And then MSMEs need, on top of leadership skills, they also need cooperation skills, because increasingly we're living, and I think it was, I can't remember who it was, the lady from Poland. I cannot see you on the screen.
Alina.
Elena, that was mentioning that, we're getting in very uncertain environment and very complex environment. And increasingly, you need to work with the development bank, the local NGOs, the local communities, the large businesses, and we don't teach how to collaborate, how to co-create, how to get out there and feel comfortable with people. So I just wanted to add that, because I mean, this is something we remember when we were working on the entrepreneur skills that you need for the SDGs. That was one of them.
Yeah.
But on the convincing, I think you need to have the passion. I think if you speak from the heart, if you speak from the head, you get people to listen. If you speak from the heart, you get people to jump in. And that comes from passion. I think everybody on this call is passionate, so that's why it's so it gives me back energy on a Friday night here in Geneva. And then it's about negotiation at the UN can be very painful. And the only way you can get an agreement is to be able to look at the other person and say, okay, first, what's their red line? Second, what's in it for them? And third, get to all the stakeholders, ask each one of them what's the red line, and then come up with a creative solution that may not be red, black, or white. It may be a gray purpose, but it achieve whatever each one wanted to do. So you were mentioning I'm an entrepreneur. I like the fact that I got the Schwab Foundation Entrepreneur of the Year, because I'm trying to do that. It's really hard. These are big bureaucracy, and people actually, when you come with, I think somebody mentioned new ideas. I can't remember who it was. People go, oh God, Chantalin, your new idea, because if people find they want creators, they want innovators, but they don't want it. They don't want to have to deal with the annoyance that goes with it. And if you do nothing, you don't create wave, then nobody worries about it. But if you try to do something, change things, then there might be one member state not happy, somebody maybe, and now it creates waves. So it's like whack-a-mole, it's like wonk on the head. So again, one more reason why you need the network, because you can't be alone. If you're alone inside, you need the outside supporters that can support you, and we always appreciate your support, Ayman. So for once, I'll say something positive about you.
Thank you. We're talking about creative here. Amy, raise your hand. So she's creative. She's all right, Amy. What do you have to say other than guacamole?
Well, I mean, this is exactly the strategy that I'll share my screen as well. Let's just see if I can get that to play nicely with me now, and not shift to another screen when I do this. Oh, it's gonna do that. Just one moment while I quickly figure this. Oh, actually, I can also just not. Let's just see screen number 2. Yeah, there we go. This is when you have a 3-screen system. No, but this is exactly what what we're trying to do in UN human rights. And it's weird because UN human rights is not necessarily an advocate for MSMEs or entrepreneurship or business, but we do realize in UN human rights that innovation, that human rights needs innovation, and also innovation in all of its shapes, forms, and sizes, and that's from business, governments, and institutions, also needs human rights, because we're a lot more focused nowadays on being right than human. And so we're trying to come up with a strategy to marshal and broker new partnership and funding models that deal with the facts that actually nobody is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And that's the same for business, for countries, communities. We have to get ourselves activated. And so we've conceptualized this campaign. It's called 30 by 30 by 30. It's 30 innovation projects for 30 communities by 2030. And basically, it levers someone else was speaking about PPEs and the need to have public-private partnerships. And I would argue that we should expand that to the 3 Cs, to build something that we're calling an innovation circle. And by that, I mean bringing together countries, companies, and communities. And by that, it's how do we matchmake global North, global South, big corporates and MSMEs, and then communities, civil societies, NGOs, foundations, communities to come together to co-develop innovations that are built for the communities and serve different community needs. And we have the strategy to try and build 30 of these by 2030, using the power of an innovation circle and collaboration and coming together, identifying those problems, being innovative about what our big challenges are. And many of the SDGs are based on cross-cutting human rights issues. And same for MSMEs. We're generally trying to either serve a customer or solve a problem. And innovation is the epicenter of this. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you because I thought it was interesting for you to see where we're thinking as an institution that isn't normally an MSME institution. We're trying to connect this kind of innovation circle together. Over.
I'm glad you're there to create this innovation. Camille, you hit a pulse today in the webinar when you started out with your statement. And that pulse continued growing and people kept mentioning you. Katia mentioned you a lot, Chantaline mentioned you a lot, Winslow was messaging a lot about you and stuff like that. What is it that you felt in this meeting today? Because it seems like you have this underlying pulse that you connect with people. What are you getting out of all these conversations, Camille? And I'm putting you on the spot, but you started it. It's your fault.
You know what? I've loved today's conversation, and it's really fun for me. I spend so much time with entrepreneurs, but I don't spend as much time with academics and researchers. And so I've just really enjoyed hearing the different perspectives from so many people who are looking at the data and looking at the information. And I also, one of the things Katia said that just I really hit me was that concept of focusing on educating for resilience and leadership. And I think that that's so important. And I hadn't thought about it that way with AI and the changes that are coming. And we all know how disruptive that's going to be. And we all know how many jobs are going to be, handled with technology in basically no time. But to think about the skills that entrepreneurs and business owners and leaders in any kind of company still need, we're seeing a world that's changing so rapidly. And so for me, I loved that idea because uncertainty is just the name of the game right now. And I think that women business owners and all business owners need to be able to shift and adapt. And so I've learned so much from all of you, and I'm extremely grateful to be here and build these connections. And I think your point early on is bringing communities of different women like this together, because together we can all work together and make such an incredible impact. And so it's just been really valuable information.
Thank you, Camille. Really important. Okay, Lucia, I'm going to ask you the most difficult question here because, I've been going through this and I'm going to ask you this question. We've talked about upstream. We talked about policy. We've talked about data-driven. We talked about, financial tools. What about the human element? What about the human element for policy for OECD countries? We talk about it in ICSB. We talk about human-centered entrepreneurship. But you heard Alina kind of expose the changing of the times and the dark clouds that are coming here. And yet there's a human element that's the elephant in the room here. What do you think about this? And then I'm going to go to Francesca and Alyssa next because I keep asking them the difficult questions. They're the leaders that are coming up. So what do you think, Lucia? And good luck with the answer. Yeah.
I think, Ayman, it's a difficult but at the same time easy answer. Human element is key to a business, is key to entrepreneurship, and in the same way is key to policy making. Policy makers, these are bureaucracy, structure, agencies, but at the end of it, there is a lot of human element in terms of awareness, in terms of understanding, in terms of priorities, in terms of attitudes. I mentioned at the beginning that I transitioned from academic career to the OECD. What I found extremely useful in this transition was the need to translate complex messages and complex information into something that can be easily understood by a given audience, as it happens sometimes with students, not simplified, but turn into a language that the audience can understand. And I think, as you can imagine this for students, for researchers, that's the same for policymakers. So I think this is for us always important, even at the OECD, to think that in the end, what we are serving or our main stakeholders, this is human being with a certain culture, with a certain background. So we work in an organization that has 38 members and counting because of the many other partners. So understanding their culture, understanding their approach, and we hear from them often, help us better understand what are the issues, help us better understand what's the view from the businesses. So I think we always have to think that in the end, we are talking to individuals that need themselves education, that need themselves training before they can take informed decision. Let me, however, stress one point, because I think it's related very much to the human element and the priorities that come with different, let's say, human or different organization or parties, etc. The SME agenda has grown a lot into the attention of policymakers worldwide over the past decades. For us, it has always been important, but let's say we clearly saw with COVID, with the repeated crisis, I don't think we should take it for granted. Ayman, you have been an engine, the engine behind the MSME Day. It took time. It happened probably at the moment where there was momentum. We should not forget that momentum, they also go unless there is continued investigation, unless there is continued engagement. And in this case, I would say, unless MSMEs and entrepreneurs themselves do not have they need to keep the space, their voice heard. One example, we have seen a resurgence of new industrial policies over the past few years. And we heard the call from the ministers that gathered at the OECD 2 years ago. Let's keep industrial policies inclusive of SMEs, because there is a risk that is also recognized by policymakers that we go back to the idea that it's all about the very big guys, the very big businesses and the leaders. And the more muscular the work economy gets, the greater I think is the risk. It's not, I think, a question of gender or masculinity or femininity. It's really this idea that it's the big companies. We know that big companies are important, but let's not forget what makes them competitive and what makes communities and economies, even at the local level, resilient and competitive. So just to say, as there are humans behind, it's very important to keep the attention on this agenda with knowledge, with evidence base, or keeping also this to the fact, but also spaces like this open and with a loud voice.
Okay, absolutely eloquent. Thank you so much, Lucia. You raised the bar here. And I want to bring in the future leaders. I believe there's always future leaders coming in. And I want to start with Alyssa first because of her dynamism. Alyssa, you've heard this. You spoke a little bit, but you've heard a lot. And one of it is for you to see what's going on here. What's your reaction to all of this, Alyssa?
Well, I certainly love that we're talking about the human element, because to me in medicine, the human element is key. It's the cornerstone of what we do. It's sacred, and it's crucial that we maintain that. At the same time, we have a burnout problem. And, you know, I say this a lot. We have a burnout problem not because medicine is hard or stressful. Like, we know that. That's what we signed up for. We have a burnout problem because many parts of the system are broken. So from my perspective, you know, one of the questions I'm always asking myself is, how can we use technology to decrease the burden? Because if technology is gonna, you know, just going to add to the burden, then we're no better off. But if we can use technology to decrease the burden, then I think we're winning. So an example of this is, let's take AI scribes. If we can use AI scribes effectively, then physicians, nurses, clinicians can step out from behind the computer and go back to talking with their patients, which I think is what people really want. They want to have that human element, and I think it's crucial to what we do in medicine. So the question we get asked the most, I would say, is AI going to replace humans? Is AI going to replace doctors, nurses? And my answer to that is always no. It's not going to replace any person, but I do think people who use AI are going to replace those who don't, assuming that we can use it in the right ways.
Thank you, Alyssa. Absolutely fantastic. And Francesca, what do you think?
So I echo everything Alyssa just said. But I think also that book that was mentioned, it's Co-Intelligence. The title is there for a reason. Co-intelligence. It's not, it's, I think what we really need to focus on is how humans will be living with these technologies. And it's no longer a knowledge acquisition. Now knowledge is so easy and accessible, I think, compared to historical times. Now it's more knowledge management. There's so much out there, and then how do we manage it? So I think AI can help us do that. And then, other technologies, but in the end, entrepreneurs will always be humans. I think that's, and focusing on various countries and the ecosystems there and the diversity, women, all of it, I think is only going to lead to success.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to say my last sentence here, but I'm going to ask Winslow to close the session for us here. I incorporated a lot of the questions that came into the questions I asked. So we did our open table discussion here. I wholeheartedly believe in whole brain thinking, that you have to bring all the different components of your brain in the way you think here. The people on this session today and what you brought here is a perfect example as holistically how we can all think together. There are certain areas that are contradictory, certain areas that complement each other, certain areas that we exponentially build, but we need to do whole brain thinking. And that's the power of us coming together as experts, as human beings. But also what I say is that empathetic part, which is kind of mentioned before, is we can think with our brains, but we can also think with our hearts. And imagine if we can think with both at the same time. So I want to thank you all for being part of this and for engaging with me and giving me your 2 hours of your valuable time today here. But I think the most eloquent speaker that always opens sessions and closes sessions for us on MSME Day and sets the tone right is my colleague, Dr. Winslow Sargent, and he's very eloquent in putting things together. And I love him for it, but I also don't like him for it. So I'm going to end up with liking him with it. Winslow, close the session for us today.
Okay, well, I appreciate the kind words, Dr. Terabishi. Of course, you've set the bar so high, that I won't be able to reach it. But this is a very important session. There's something about coming together to have a candid discussion about what are some of the challenges that we face. And it's always great to have leaders from across the spectrum, from different perspectives, from different industries, because at the end of the day, and I think that we started out by talking about the importance of networking. I shared with someone is that with men in general, they go to country clubs, they play golf. There are so many ways to network, to so many ways to do deals, to solve problems. But unfortunately, for women, those networking opportunities aren't there sometimes, or they're not available. And it's in the networking. That's when discussions are made about what type of regulatory trials you should take, what type of technology. It lowers the bar in terms of the imposter syndrome, because we all face it. It doesn't matter where we come from. We always feel that maybe we shouldn't be there. But it's in these type of discussions that we have that we kind of level set to say, hey, you know what? I'm dealing with the same issues that you're dealing with. And you have had, and you may have some experience that I may not have, or you may have 1 or 2 degrees of separation from me, that you can contact that banker, contact that investor, contact that entrepreneur, contact that technology, that we come together. And so I'm just so pleased that we had the opportunity today to have those type of discussions. And this is a call to action, and this is a beginning, right? You know, this is not a finish line. This is only this is a start. And so I look forward to having more discussions and more engagement, because this, you know, Ayman and I are, as men on this panel, we understand the importance of allyship, right? We become better because you become better. You know, it's Ubuntu, as my friend Dr. Keyshawn Kim liked to say. I am because you are. We are, and so and with that said, I'm just so pleased that we had the opportunity to share today.
Thank you, Dr. Winslow. That was 7 minutes, a little bit late, but we started a little bit late. I want to end it. Happy International Women's Day. We look forward to seeing a lot of you in ICSB World Congress in Sydney. Vicky is hosting us there, the incoming chair of ICSB. So she's looking forward to it. She sent me a message saying Happy International Women's Day, but it's very late there. So she said she'll join us in Sydney and make sure we all can get together. Thank you very much. And we look forward to connecting with you again. Take care.
Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye bye.